And Guru Maharaj, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, good. There you are. So we're turning this over to you today for your very auspicious happy birthday, appearance day. And thank you for being with us. And you're going to give a special talk. And you'll let us know what that's all about.
Well, I don't really have a talk planned
Okay.
Per se, but Manaba Maharaj suggested that this would be a good opportunity, given that we have a call every Sunday, and that this Sunday happens to correspond with this particular day prior to Gaur Punim, which corresponds with my birth in the world, to take advantage of that and give the devotees who aren't with me an opportunity to hear from me on this day. So it was his idea. But as I said, I don't have any talk per se planned. I suppose I can say something about Guru Tattva. You would probably like to hear something about my personal life, memories for which are, as they say, at this point, longer than the road that lies ahead. So I'm 71, and this should be the last quarter of my life, and I am adjusting my life accordingly and taking advantage of those memories and opportunities that they present to learn from. And that of course includes mistakes. They're only as bad as we don't learn from them. Otherwise, they're really just learning opportunities that we find ourselves in by Krishna's grace. So, of course, the subject of Guru is a big subject in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, in which, for example, as opposed to many other traditions, there are a plurality of gurus or types of gurus. Just leave it to Gaudiya Vaishnavism to complicate any particular issue. So there are Vartma Pradaksh gurus, Siksha gurus, Diksha gurus, Sannyas gurus, Ragmarg gurus, gurus who are Shastra gurus, previous gurus, present gurus, and there should be future gurus as well. So many types of gurus, but they all collectively are mediums to which the same purpose is served ultimately, that we are taught about the dispensation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, both by precept and by example. These days, it's common in my experience to hear questions like, what does it mean to have a relationship with the Guru? I think that is somewhat arises out of the very word relationship, which has become a big word. And you know, rightfully so. For example, in a marital relationship, it's a relationship. It's not just a one-way street. Woman does what man says, something like that. So, you know, that previous notions kind of been exploded, and so this word relationship has become a bigger word, so to speak, than it was in the past. And so I get that kind of a question sometimes. And I've answered it in different ways, but the way in which Prabhupada answered it without having been directly asked in those particular terms, he had many years ago decided at a certain point to give initiation to some of his students. And they asked, what does that mean? So basically, it's the same question. And some of you may know that he answered that the Guru is as good as God. That's how he answered the question. And then he walked out. And some people dropped out at that point. And some stayed on and, of course, took initiation the next day. So what's the relationship with the Guru? One could say it's to do what he says. And we may want more than that of an answer, if you will, but that's properly understood, that's pretty big. Because he or she is going to tell us what's best for us. There's a nice book. It's probably the best of its genre that I've seen. That was published kind of out of the mainstream by a disciple of Bhakti Vallabha Tirtha Maharaj, who used to, who saw Bhakti Pramod Puri Goswami Maharaj as his Siksha Guru. Bhakti Vallabha Tirtha Maharaj is a disciple of Madhav Maharaj, and Pramod Puri Goswami Maharaj was his god brother, who lived with him for some time after the passing of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who was their guru. So they were godbrothers, Madhav Maharaj, Puri Maharaj, Sridhar Maharaj, Bhai Prabhupada, they were all godbrothers. And Puri Maharaj, Pramod Puri Maharaj, was, after the disappearance of Bhakti Siddhanta, he lived for quite some time in Madhav Maharaj's mission. So he knew Vallabha Tirtha Maharaj growing up as a sadhaka and so forth. And when he became a sannyasi and he became the successor of the mission of Madhav Maharaj, he always had great respect for Puri Goswami Maharaj. And on his request, Puri Maharaj Goswami's request, Vallabha Tirtha Maharaj came to the West, came to America. He visited us here at Mount Arya at one point. At my invitation. He's passed on from the world now, of course, too, but he would be a spiritual cousin of mine, if you will. But anyway, out of the mainstream of Puri Goswami Maharaj's mission, I know her by the name Ruchira. I forget her initiated name, but she's a Bengali devotee and a scientist living here in the West. She wrote a biography of Pramod Puri Goswami Maharaj, and I wasn't really aware of that, but someone acquired it here. It was in the ashram, and Brenda recently found it. It's quite a good book, in my opinion, the best that I've seen of its genre being a biography of one's guru. Of course, I knew Puri Maharaj personally and served him. And was successful in bringing some disciples to him after the passing of Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj, which is at whose mouth I met Puri Goswami Maharaj, who used to come there annually at on this particular day, the Vyasa Puja of Sridhar Maharaj, and pay homage to Sridhar Maharaj, whom we also considered as his Siksha Guru. So after the passing of Sridhar Maharaj, I had the good fortune of coming under his Puri Maharaj's blessing. So anyway, it's a very nice biography that she's done. And as I say, the best that I've seen in that genre, so I would recommend it. And Puri Maharaj speaks candidly in the book about being a disciple, and also about having disciples. And it's apparent from his own embrace of the real import of being a disciple and having an appropriate relationship with the Guru, of really giving oneself over entirely at his or her disposal, with the understanding that the Guru has in mind only our best interest. We unfortunately often don't have our best interest in mind, not that well understanding what our self really is, and conflating it with the mind's desires and so forth and so on. The whole idea, of course, of a relationship with the Guru is to learn from him and see by his example how to perfect, in one sense, the practitioner's body. We think in a certain way about our bodily and psychological sense of self. We're grounded in, and other ideas of embodiment may seem far-fetched, given how grounded we are in the human bodily conception of life. There's a lot of intellectual discourse about the nature of the body, philosophical discourse, wide-ranging perspectives, all of which are unfortunately human-centric and grounded in the delimited physical and psychological sense of self that we find ourselves, whereas we find in Gaudiya Vaishnavism different ideas of embodiment, the embodiment of the absolute truth, the very personification of prema, of love, and Sri Krishna, a transcendental body, is described in the scriptures having, some places having no body, in other places having an extraordinary body. The latter being more, the majority of the statements, and thus the statements to the effect that he has no form are understood by Gonavritti to be speaking about the fact that he has no form like ours, no flesh and blood, or limited or form that inhibits rather than enhances in all respect. The very form, expression of the object of love, with whom, or in relationship to whom, we can be ourselves an embodiment of love, or the very form of prema. So what's interesting, as I'm saying, is that our present sense of self, our identity, largely arises out of how we interact with our senses, which the body is constituted of. They're both knowledge acquiring senses through hearing, through seeing, through tasting, and so on. And then there's the active senses, the legs, the arms, and so on. But basically, the body is made up of senses, the sixth of which, or the 11th of which, depending how you look at it, is the mind, kind of the central computer of it all. And through our senses, we contact sense objects, and we get impressions of mind, from which that mind makes determinations. I like or I don't like, good or bad, happy or sad, and so forth. And that's really our personality. That's what distinguishes us from others. And so the very idea that the body that we have could be spiritualized, that might sound far-fetched to some people, somewhat of a transubstantiation, like we have in the Catholic Church, where the host of the wine and the bread becomes the body, the Christ becomes spiritual. So a kind of transubstantiation where the material body becomes spiritual. But the practical side of it is really that what we're taught and what we're shown by the example of the Guru is how to interact with sense objects, which is what life's about, through our senses, only for the pleasure of Krishna. Rishikesha Sevanam, Bhakti Ruchite. And this is bhakti. So now you can imagine that some of you may have the experience if you've been applying yourself, which of course we should. If we have a good example, we have good teachings, and we have very generous teaching. I happen to be very generous in my own opinion, particularly in relation to students of mine, many of whom, the majority of whom, come from less than desirable circumstances of previous involvement with bhakti in other traditions, with other teachers, and so on and so forth. So they're kind of damaged goods in some respect. They've been mistaught about things. They've had bad examples. Their faith is damaged, and so on and so forth. Often is the case. And I was asked by Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj, my Sikshaguru, to do relief work and help those types of persons primarily, rather than to focus on bringing new people into the tradition. So I've been doing that, as many of you know, for many years. Not that new people don't also come, and I don't tender to them, but the majority of my students have had previous involvement that such that they have to be untaught certain things and retaught and dealt with gently and generously, that their tender faith in bhakti might have an opportunity to grow and become strong. And so, that said, my generosity should not be taken advantage of. It's clear from the teachings, and I'm pretty good at articulating, explaining the teachings, that what bhakti constitutes, while it requires only one's faith to be involved, that faith sometimes I've often referred to as Shastriya Shraddha. It's faith in what bhakti is, as explained from the sacred texts. And it's a whole lifestyle. It's not a part-time thing. It's said that bhakti frees one from karma. You may wonder, how am I freed from karma? You're probably not. Because you're probably not fully embracing the lifestyle of bhakti, which means, again, as I'm explaining, that all of my senses are in touch with sense objects now only for the pleasure of Krishna. The point I was making is, it's very reasonable to conclude that that would make a very big difference, and a different personality would arise out of that, inasmuch as our present personality, materially speaking, arises again out of our contact with sense objects through the senses, from which we get impressions that register on the mind, and which the mind reacts to as good or bad, happy or sad, I like or I don't like. Sankalpa vikalpa, this kind of acceptance and rejection that then forms the personality that makes me different from another person. My likes may be different from your likes. My dislikes may be different from your dislikes, and so forth. So if these same senses are applied in relation to sense objects only for the pleasure of the deity, of Krishna, then it's quite understandable that a different personality will arise out of that. And that it will be a different body altogether, used entirely for a different purpose. The body only for the pleasure of Krishna, the mind only for the pleasure of Krishna. And of course, there's a huge variety of ways in which the body and mind can be engaged in Krishna's service. Rupa Goswami himself was given 64 angas or limbs of the body of bhakti. That are, some are verbal, some are mental, some are physical, and anywhere in between. That the entirety of our sensual life, if you will, can be engaged in relation to sense objects for the pleasure of Krishna. This will obviously have a very different effect than the effect of having our sense objects in touch with sense objects for the pleasure of the mind. Pleasure, pain, this all exists, of course, in the mind. Now we have a different idea, a spiritual idea, to make a determination whether something's good or bad, happy or sad, and so on and so forth. So this is what bhakti really means. And the guru is thought to embody this and set an example of this forth, an example that we are to follow. Sadhana bhakti is, of course, bhakti in practice. So in practice makes perfect. So there's going to be some ups and downs, and there is a stage in bhakti which we call anishta, which is unsteady. So it's kind of a winding road. But to be on that course and be really in the school of Shuddha Bhakti, of Uttam Bhakti, it means it has to be constantly striving, in spite of one's failing, for example, to employ the mind and senses in Krishna's sense objects at times, to get up from that and continue to try and to uproot. Faith is all that's required to tread the path of bhakti, but the path of bhakti involves not being interested in material life. It's a transcendental path. So in the context of applying ourselves in bhakti, there's an uprooting that has to take place of our present situation. We have to move. So we have to change. It's all about willingness to change and so forth. So it's unfortunate when we come to good association and generous association and good example and teachings, and then fail to apply ourselves and understand what the relationship, if you will, with the guru is, and how his or her advice is in our interest, even if it pinches us. I can't remember how many times I've said in the past, if we don't feel the pinch, then we're probably not giving. It's actually a quote from Mother Teresa, so I guess she got that right. There's the famous story, Govinda Bhog, of the farmer who was criticized by one of his workers that you grow so much wheat, but you never give any to Govinda, to Krishna. You're not religious. And he said, "What are you talking about? I give every day." And he showed them. He picked some wheat flowers. In the context of picking them, in the wind, some of the flowers were taken. And he said, "Govinda Namaha." So those that were blown away beyond his control, nothing he could do about it, then he offered them to Govinda. So we don't want to be like that. We don't want to be a Dandavat disciple. Guru Maharaj has made a nice point. He was very, very generous also, but it didn't mean that he didn't have high expectations of his students. He said that, and some of them come once a year in the mood of taking a vacation. This is not Guru Seva. Come to see me once a year, and the mood is to have a vacation. I'm on vacation now. This is not Guru Seva. So it's serious business if we want to take advantage of it and progress and make a comprehensive solution, not to the world of problems, but to the fact that the world is the problem. I mean, this is the transcendental perspective. We should try to live as simply as possible, keep with enough material necessities to keep Prabhupada's language, body, and soul together, and apply ourselves fully in the transcendental practice. If we want to be freed from karma, which is basically what material life is about, we've taken and now we owe. There's a nice idea within Varnashram, and our path transcends Varnashram. Within our Varnashram, for example, it's taught that householders, those who are working in the world, have to give in charity because they have, their life is one of taking. So if they're going to take within the realm of karma, to provide and so forth and so on for their own families, then they need to be licensed in doing so, and the license is acquired. You have to pay for the license. There's a law in the Varnashram. It's not like if you would like to give, that would be nice. You have to give. And it's not a mean statement, because by saying that you have to give in the Varnashram, according to the karmic law, by saying that you have to give, it's saying that it's implying that if you don't give, you will be paying more. The price will be greater. You're taking without license to take. Now there will be greater repercussions for that. Therefore, you must give. You must give. And of course, we're in the path of bhakti, so we're not following the path of karma. It transcends karma, but only as much as we apply ourselves fully in bhakti with earnestness on a regular basis to diminish our material necessities and not be ruled by our mind's demands, the demands of the world, and sensual demands, and so forth. It's a striving in the stage of sadhana, in the this early stages of practice, when the path is kind of, like I said, kind of ups and downs, so to speak. Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj described it as a do or die approach to the practice. There's a dying in that that we have to embrace. He used to cite, my Siksha Guru Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj, Hegel's term, die to live. He had, of course, his own interpretation of it. But once we liked the term, one of my godbrothers put on his license plate of his Mercedes, die to live. It was a used Mercedes, but I saw it one day and I had to chuckle. Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj said to us at one point, it's very poetic, but it's a difficult pill to swallow. To give a death to the ego. Maybe you don't need a Mercedes to get around. And put die to live on your license plate is not to have heard and understood what he said and meant and implied and was trying to generously impart to us when he would invoke such a phrase, die to live. So I wandered a bit there into Puri Maharaj's book at first. Perhaps there was a particular point I was going to make, but I don't recall, but it's worth mentioning the book itself, and a very nice example that he, of saintly life that he sets there, and discipleship that he sets there. There was a time when he was publishing, he was very much involved in the printing, which was a big part of the Gaudiya mission of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. In those days, the scriptures were typically preserved in temples under the care of Brahmins who would teach them and so forth. And they weren't like thousands of editions collecting dust on people's shelves and so forth. So after the passing of Bhakti Vinod Thakur, who was so proficient. I say, so he who had written so much, poems, songs, theological books, philosophical books, even some confessional texts and so forth. Voluminous. I mean, he was a real waterfall of literature at the time, seeing the need for siksha in the community, for teaching in the community accurately what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was about. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur very much centered his mission on publishing, and a lot of it was publishing the works of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And so Puri Maharaj, Pramod Puri Maharaj, was involved in the printing press, the publishing. He was an editor. He wrote many articles himself and so forth. And he was working all day long in the press. And he was a brahmachari, a celibate student from the very beginning, one of the earliest students of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Would sleep on the floor, ready to wake at any moment for the service of Guru Maharaj in the ashram and so forth. And he was working, as I say, at one point full-time in the press, and the word came that his father was ill or something to that effect, and could not afford care or medicine, something to that effect. So news was given to him, and he reported the news to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who considered to give him permission to take time off from the press to help his ailing father. But Puri Maharaj said, no, I will have to continue my service. And then after hours, I will get a job to do a little extra work to provide some help for that situation of my previous life that still remains somewhat in the present. So such an extraordinary example of what it means to be a student and have a relationship, if you will, with the Guru. It's not a part-time thing, really. And yes, it's said, whether you're a sannyasi living in the forest, a monk, or a householder, it doesn't matter. Grihe tako, vane tako, sada hari boli tako. Using the phrase of Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself, we say Grihe tako, vane tako. Doesn't matter, householder or monastic. But the second part of the line is, it doesn't matter if in each situation, Grihe tako, living tako, as a householder, vane tako, or living in the forest, sada hari boli tako. There's no difference if one's always engaged, or sada hari boli tako, always chanting the name of Krishna, always applying ourselves in the angas of bhakti. It's obvious that if you fully apply yourself, your senses, to the angas, the limbs of bhakti, you will not be within the grasp of karma. You wonder how it is. It seems like by following bhakti, I'll be free from karma. It seems like I'm not. You're probably not, because you're probably not. Your faith is to tend, so to speak, to be able to express it in the form of Sharanagati, beginning of which is Pratikul, Anukul, accepting what's favorable, rejecting what's unfavorable to bhakti. There's a whole new criterion of what's good and what's bad. So as much as we're able to live like that, much as we're able to apply ourselves like that, we're actually on the path of Shuddha Bhakti. To the extent that we conceptually are on the path of Shuddha Bhakti, but practically speaking, we're maybe doing karma, maybe the fruits of our karma we're giving to Krishna. Maybe not. Maybe we're chasing the fruits of karma more than we are bhakti. So that's a problem that should be rectified. And it's something I want to focus on in the last quarter of my life in terms of emphasizing this to my students with whom I've been very generous for good reasons. I think it was necessary and so on and so forth. But Prabhupada used the analogy of boiling the milk. He thought it was time to do that in as early as 1975 in his mission. Here it is. We're extension of his mission in 2020. Of course, I have boiled the milk conceptually, I think, in terms of the plumbing the depths of the teaching, its implications, and so on and so forth. And I've set a good example of practice as well, but this practice has to be emphasized and brought into everyone's life with renewed vigor. And this is a good day to start asking the question yourself again, given that you have the answer now. What does it mean to have a relationship with the Guru? It may seem limited, just do what he or she says, but there's a wealth in that. There's a great wealth in that, in the wisdom of that advice and how it would benefit us in the long run, even when often, if not more often than not, in the short term, it will make us uncomfortable. Don't think that making progress will come without being uncomfortable. Don't think that good things, good ideas, and ideas of Krishna consciousness in the world will not give rise to a wide variety of obstacles. Any good undertaking will give rise to obstacles. Prabhupada used to say to me that if you're preaching, if there's no complaints, you're not really preaching. So we're here to bother her. I'm here to bother you all. That's the point. I'm here to trouble you all, to give you some difficulty, that you may make progress, tangible progress in this life. It's never too late, but to pay attention and reapply ourselves. And often this is a day in which we do this on the day of the appearance of our Guru Day, but we remember, he came into our life and we express sentiments and so on and so forth. And that's well and good, but these days are meant to be celebrated such that they carry us, that celebration carries us into the next day, and the next day, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days in a week. Next year, it carries us for 2 weeks, the same spirit that we woke up with on that day, and conviction and sincerity and so forth, remembering how I met my Guru, what it means, and so forth, and so on. And in the third year, you remember it for a month, and the point is obviously that eventually that becomes an everyday experience. Every day, what it meant that these teachings have come in a particular way, in a custom way, in a form, because there are many gurus, many faces of the tradition, if you will, that are really custom packages for different types of individuals and so forth. So that Krishna has come to me in this way, that when he speaks, it is as if that's what I wanted to say. That I feel like that. I resonate with that. He can articulate it better than I could, but it's not a foreign imposition. It's true. We have to take that truth and we have to apply it. So I think it's worth emphasizing that on this point. I always approached my own relationship with my gurus in that way from the very beginning. I unplugged myself entirely from material life and placed myself at the disposal of Srila Prabhupada, and with all of my limited and qualities and abilities. I can tell you I was quite limited and uneducated and unexperienced. And I just placed myself at the feet of Prabhupada and tried to understand what he wanted, and to try to help him accomplish that. Someone, Padmanabh Maharaj, wrote some biographical kind of glorification of me recently. It was published on The Harmonist. He was talking with a devotee named Satyaraj, who publishes a journal entitled The Journal of Vaishnava Studies. It's an academic journal. He was going to do an issue on unknown or less known Vaishnavas. So Padmanabh Maharaj said he wanted to write something about me. Of course, I knew that he wouldn't publish it. He would have some excuse. But I thought it was a nice idea, in that typically, I think what would come to mind with that theme is Vaishnavas from the past who are unknown. The fact is that there are some or less known, but they may be unknown today or less known. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur said it's a symptom of Kali Yuga that present day teachers will be less known and recognized, while the previous teachers will be glorified, but there'll be a lacking in the presence. So that's fairly common. Was the point? But anyway, I applied myself to Prabhupada's teachings and desires wholeheartedly and unplugged from material existence, and applied myself, and it was fruitful. It was very, 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 very fruitful. Certain things I did, I would have done differently. I was saying Padmanabh Maharaj published this article, and it was published in the Harmonist. The author of the editor of the journal decided not to publish it, which I knew he wouldn't. I told Padmanabh Maharaj from the beginning that I suspected that. I thought it would have been a good idea, not because of who I am, but because it would have been novel in terms of the theme, which typically would probably characterize or refill with articles about unknown Vaishnavas or less known Vaishnavas of the past. The fact that there could be less known Vaishnavas of the present who are doing something substantial in our midst and so forth that we're missing and not paying attention to was a worthy angle, I thought, for an article. But of course, he didn't publish it. So anyway, he published it on the Harmonist, and then someone who has a sibling in our Sangha apparently wrote a comment, and the comments come to the editors, and then they come to me as well and said, "You probably won't publish this," but and I won't give my name because I have a sibling in the Sangha, and I don't want to get that sibling in trouble by saying this. So he or she wrote that in the past, Swami Tripurari was distributing books in ISKCON, and some of the ways in which devotees distributed books were left others questioning the morality of the mission. Some of you who were involved in book distribution know how that came to pass. There was a context to that, and so forth, where we sometimes sold books and exchange for money and so forth, and sometimes it wasn't so upfront. Could you give a little more, and so on and so forth. That even in a number of instances brought the morality of the transaction into question, right? So this person brought this up and said, "You probably won't publish this, but maybe this should have been, brought out in the hagiography of the Swami," something that happened, of course, half a century ago, in the early days of ISKCON. So I took trouble to write back to the person. I didn't publish it because they didn't want to have it published, because they thought their sibling, who was apparently a member of our Sangha, might get in trouble. The person who wrote it would probably get in trouble with the sibling, but the sibling wouldn't get in trouble. And she or she could probably give as good of an answer as I could to the question. He said that his grandmother had met a devotee who sold a book and stole the $5 bill and ran away with it, which is something, of course, we didn't do. We didn't teach that. Um, um, but then he said his grandmother found that I was responsible for that, and therefore rejected Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So it was interesting to see. It was a nice article that Padmanabh Marsh wrote. It's published on the Harmonist. I think it must be there today. You can read it. For someone to bring up that point, there are many ways in which one could respond. Of course, I responded that, the context was that we were taught that there's an absolute good that transcends the relative good, an absolute love that transcends the law. And this should be applied, we were taught, in relation to circulating the books. Somehow or other, Prabhupada said, by hook or by crook, sell the book. Those were words. And that there would be benefit for persons who got the book in the beginning stages of the mission that exceeded the downside of any questionable, well, by hook or by crook, sell the book technique, if you will. And we were, so that came from Prabhupada. We were convinced about that. And I think that there was a lot of benefit that accrued people that would not have otherwise, had we not taken that kind of literally, perhaps we shouldn't have. And I readily admit that if I had, it's easy to look back now and question some of the practices. And if I had to do it over, of course, I'd probably do it differently. But we don't have that luxury. Excuse me for a minute here. Of hindsight, I'd say 20, but need to plug in this machine here. Excuse me, which required me to move. Hold on. I'll be with you in a moment. Well, lights up the background a bit, but not sure how I segued into that article of Padmanabh Maharaj, but let me use it to say that I'm not without my faults, especially from my youth. But in those days, at any rate, upon joining, I had a conviction that this required some uprooting and full giving of oneself, which we did, some of which for me involves, of course, the way I spent my life in those early days of ISKCON and Prabhupada's presence was basically to rise and chant and read and say something about myself personally. I started the idea, for the most part, of rising at 3 a.m. when Mongol Artik was early enough at 4:30, which everyone would attend. But my idea was to get up at 3 and have chanted all of one's rounds for a couple of hours prior to the Mongol Artik, and then after the Artik have time to read and chant before the class, read and chant personally before the class was given. And then all day we would go out and talk to people about Krishna, about what was in the books, and come back at night and attend the Artik and the class, and then get together and read, sip some hot milk and take a rest. And some of you are nodding your heads there, that you were also part of that kind of lifestyle. Once a godbrother of mine named Rupanuga told me, you have to be very careful what you say. And I said, oh, okay. He said, because any brahmachari, whatever you say, they will do. Whatever you eat, they will eat. However, whatever direction you sleep, they will sleep. However you walk, they will walk, and so forth. So I got in that position just by giving myself to Prabhupada. It's not something I desired or looked for, but it came naturally as a result of giving myself to Prabhupada. So I spent my life basically in these affairs of reading and chanting, and then speaking about the what was there in the text, and also worship of the deity. These are all examples of what's called Sarup Siddha Bhakti. This is bhakti that is very potent, and from which you can make the most progress. You should try to spend as much of your life as possible in these activities. We have to do some Arup Siddha Bhakti, like take a shower is not bhakti, but it's karma. If it's not bhakti, it's karma, right? If it's action. But we take a shower to cleanse our practitioner's body, to participate in Krishna's service. That's Arup Siddha. That means we assign bhakti to the activity. And in and of itself is not bhakti, which is done for the purpose of bhakti. So we have to do some of that, but for the most part, we should try to live in full engagement in Sangha Siddha Bhakti. And I've had the fortune to be able to do that for my whole life. I have to say, of course, when I separated from ISKCON by force of circumstances and started the mission of the blessings of Puja Patrita Marsh, I had to get involved in a few more things than just hearing and chanting, and deity worship. A little bit of management, which is not my forte. Organization, purchasing of properties, and so on and so forth. Those aren't the bad things. They can be done for Krishna, and certainly they were, and so on. But at this point, I've done that to some extent, and we have a nice group of devotees. And I said to myself, I think I mentioned it last year, so I was going to be semi-retired. So I'm moving more in that direction, which means that I simply preoccupy myself with hearing and chanting, and of course the writing is a replacement for going out and selling the books, writing books, and a nice situation here at Audarya, with the help of Ganesh and Vrinranya, to be able to do that. And I still plan to visit other places and so forth, but that's what you can expect from me. And this way, I've lived a blessed life, and I hope to set a good example in the last quarter of it for all of you, that you can really make some tangible progress by continuing to hear from me and studying my own example. Again, I'm a fortunate person. That's all I can say. When I was very young, before I joined the mission, the first time I understood, if you will, what religion was. I was brought up in a Catholic family. I thought, oh, I guess that means I should become a priest. So it's kind of an all-in person, if you will. But I was disappointed by the example of the priests in high school, and so that set me for what I found to be missing there. And by good fortune, I was able to meet Prabhupada, who, upon meeting, I met Prabhupada first in a dream before I had met him personally. And then I saw the dream play out years later in Prabhupada's presence. What had transpired in the dream transpired in waking time some years later in his presence, it happened. What happened in the dream happened a few times with me in his presence, walking with him, and then of course I joined the mission, and after a traveling group of devotees I joined, and then after 3 months, Prabhupada came to Los Angeles just to give some history, and I was fortunate to meet him there, and he gave me initiation and so forth. And let's say, well, I guess I've already said I kept myself very much engaged in hearing and chanting practically exclusively. And in due course, he passed. I met Puja Sridhar Maharaj, who was such a great support, kind, generous, insightful. He asked me to do what I'm doing. So that's my relationship with my gurus. I do what they ask. I do what they suggest. Prabhupada used to say that my Guru Maharaj ordered me to print books and speak in English. If you look carefully at that, you'll see that he suggested it in a letter in response to Prabhupada asking for some service. If it would be good if you get money, you could print books. It'd be good for you to speak in English language. Prabhupada took that as an order, and he attributed all of his success in his mission to that, having just followed that one order. We're fortunate sometimes to get so many orders. We're unfortunate because we don't take up any of them, or half take up one or the other. And that becomes our better not to give an order, almost. Then it becomes the opposite. It becomes an offense to the name. So I'm taking my time, what I'm saying to you in the last quarter of my life, seriously. And as I explained, I think it's clear, I pretty much took my life, spiritual life, very seriously from the very beginning, from age 22. And prior to that, even in searching. So what it may mean now, with all that I know, all that I've experienced, all the memories that I have, what it would mean to take the last quarter of my life even more seriously. So I expect all of you, whatever period of life you're in, to take it the opportunity that Gaudiya Vaishnavism constitutes, and the extent that it's come before you through my person and others, my teachers and so forth, to take it seriously and spend your time wisely, make the changes that are necessary to make real and tangible spiritual progress. So those are my thoughts. Here I blabbed for a whole hour, so.
That was absolutely wonderful. Really appreciated that talk a lot.
If you have time, anyone can question or answer.
Anybody have a question that they would like to follow up the talk with?
I would like to ask Guru Maharaj, do you have the title or the full author's name of that biography?
I don't. Let me see if I can get it. Hold on. Rindaranya? What's the title of Puri Maharaj's book?
What's that?
Can you bring me Puri Maharaj's book?
Yeah.
Looks like coming out of time too.
My able assistant here is bringing it.
Thank you.
Guru Maharaj, that's
See that?
A life of devotion.
Life of Devotion. Right. The Holy Biography of Om Vishnu Pachi Bhakti Pramod Puri Goswami Maharaj. One of the earliest disciples of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He lived into maybe about 106, 108. Good question.
Thank you.
Another question?
who's the author of Puri Maharaj?
The author is here, someone?
Haribol Guru Maharaj, this is Manohar Das. You mentioned that you were taking care of a few damaged devotees, and I was wondering what should be your attitude towards those damaged devotees?
Pardon me again? Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
You said that you were taking care of a lot of damaged devotees as part of your mission, and I was wondering, how should we deal with those damaged devotees?
Well, generously, as you've seen by my example, be generous, supportive. Sometimes their faith is damaged by the unfortunate experiences they've encountered and so forth, and they need friendship and support in terms of where they're at in general, without stressing to them that they should continue the practice, they should find new guidance, and so on and so forth, which is true. The latter is true, but they may not be able to digest such type of instruction. So that's what I mean by being generous, giving people some time, befriending them, simply empathizing with them, talking about something else with them, so that they keep friends in camaraderie with persons like yourself, other devotees that they know. That may be the best thing in some instances to help keep them within the kind of the ballpark of the good opportunity that's come before them, that they may not see as such because it's been misrepresented to them and so forth. So just to be generous, and I mean, that's just a broad answer, but the question is one that doesn't they can't be given one size fits all specific. In specific instances, then I could give more specific advice, but in general, that's my answer. I have a question here from Jack Maharaj. What is Maharaj's suggestions for those of us who are completely new but desire to be his disciple? Sometime, Jack, I think that keep hearing, and as you have been, and questioning, and try to make a point to come and visit at some point. I'll be in the East Coast in the spring, in May, for a couple of weeks. That would be a good opportunity, and I do that again in the fall, since you're on the eastern side of the States. But I mean, joining these talks, part of that and so forth. Acquaint yourself more with the teachings as I teach them. Jack, I should introduce to you as a priest in one of the Christian traditions, Orthodox traditions. Forgive me, Jack, I forget exactly what tradition that is. And he's been in contact with me for quite some time now, over a year. Recently, I was on a radio program. He does, I don't know how often the program is, but broadcast to 106 different countries. And he was the host, asking questions. I was able to answer. I think that was published on Facebook, a link for that. So I want to follow up on that, but that much appreciated that opportunity. So you're doing the right things. Keep doing more of the same, I guess would be my answer to that. Anything else from anyone? All right, well, it's a little over time. So tomorrow then is the auspicious appearance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and at 4 p.m. Eastern time, through this same format and media, I will be giving a discussion. Sent. Pardon me?
Yeah, 4 p.m. your time. We said Eastern, so 7 Eastern.
It's our 7 o'clock time, and I think at Madhavan it's at 5. So I thought those would be good times. Typically, that's a day of fasting, and then after the moon rises, feasting. One of the features of how the day is celebrated. So, and the talk just before the break fast for all of you. So anyway, nice to be with you. I love you all, and As me as ever. So,
We love you.
We love you.
Hare Krishna.
Mahaprabhu ki jai, Guru Vishnu Deepa. Jai Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai, Bhakti Shri Dev Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Bhakti Vinod Parivar ki jai, Gaur Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande.
His Divine Grace Bhakti Vedanta Tripurari Swami Guru Maharaj Ki Jai.
That's why we kept her alive.
Haribo.
Anyway.
Haribo, धन्यवाद.